Thank you for joining me today for Journey to Easter, our Holy Week mini-series about the significance and meaning of each of the days of Holy Week throughout Christianity. I'm Stephen Cap Perry, host of In Good Faith, and I'm so pleased to be speaking today with Pastor Jeff McCullough. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
He is the host of Hello Saints, which is a YouTube channel we hope you'll check out, and he's also part of the Salt and Light Church in Harriman, Utah. And some people would think the day of Holy Week we're talking about, Holy Saturday. I almost feel like, Holy Saturday, Batman. What happened on this day?
Yeah.
And you said, this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love the invitation to have a conversation about Holy Week. Saturday is absolutely one of the most intriguing, fascinating, mysterious, and truly, I would say, practical, like when it just comes to practically applying to how we live our lives. And I'm super excited to talk about just the various angles there.
So the crucifixion on Friday, Good Friday or Great Friday, Holy Friday, and I can't help but think, what were the followers thinking? He gets buried to avoid being on the cross on the Sabbath, and they're bereft.
It's this cosmic letdown for most of the Jews, where they had been following this rabbi for 3 years, and he had reached celebrity Palm Sunday paparazzi status. And when it culminates to this letdown, it all centered around people's expectations not being met when it came to the type of Messiah they were expecting versus the type of Messiah he truly was. And there's so much bewilderment, disenchantment, disorientation that sets in when, in such a public and violent fashion, it all ends. So they thought. It's almost anticlimactic in a strange sense, because we know that the disciples thought that this kingdom entry into Jerusalem was going to be the messianic reign.
Yeah.
And when it didn't play out that way, and we see this on the road to Emmaus with the disciples after Jesus' resurrection, who we get a little insight into the processing of how confused and saddened and grieved they were.
We thought he was to be the one.
That's right. And there's a great lesson in that, where we conflate our expectations in the moment with God's more grand plan in our lives and what he has in store for us. And that's why in that encounter, Jesus had to explain to them everything that was taught in the Old Testament, and had to help them take a step back and look at the bigger picture, which is why I think Holy Saturday is so profound, because we know that in that liminal space between his death on the cross, his burial, and then the resurrection, there was a similar thing taking place.
So you talk about expectations.
Yeah.
So how do you apply that?
First and foremost, let's just look at it from a Jewish standpoint. The Jews were an oppressed people. They had been through a lot over the previous, generations, let alone in the Herodian reign and some of those other things. And they were desperate for deliverance. As desperate, almost to the year, if you do the math on the years from the exile into the time when Christ was there, after they had returned from the exile. It's pretty close to how long the Israelites were in captivity in Egypt. And so their expectations there were tied more to a terrestrial reign of the Messiah. And that's where I think Saturday kind of comes alive to me. Because in that sense, in that geopolitical sense of expectation and desiring to be freed from the burden of slavery or oppression from the Romans, did they not see that this Holy Week was 6 days of significant work that Jesus had been doing leading up to this, the word I keep coming back to, this cosmic climax of human redemption? And And he says on that day on the cross, "It is finished." And he breathes his last breath. And then he's placed in the tomb. And what does he do? He rests. And what day was it? It was the Sabbath. And that's
The day of rest.
the day of rest. So Jesus was actually making a profound proclamation and declaration. He didn't have to do anything on Saturday because it is finished. So the defeat of the enemy, the defeat of sin, the defeat of all that had been holding mankind captive was finished, and in that tomb he rested. So that day of rest, that Sabbath, even just from a Jewish standpoint, is pretty poetic and pretty profound.
I don't know if any human being who's lived more than 4 or 5 years does not have dashed expectations.
Yeah.
So for me today,
Yeah.
This is a way I can look at things, I think. That maybe my expectations for what I thought or hoped would happen or prayed for may be nothing compared to the, as you say, the grander plans of God, but I don't know them yet.
You don't know them yet.
Yeah.
Which means you're forced into a situation where you have nothing to do but wait. And this is what the disciples had to do. He said he was going to rise on the third day. They had maybe trauma-induced amnesia on Saturday, but we know he said it. We know he said it multiple times. He said it to the extent that the Roman authorities placed guards outside the tomb for fear that in order to fabricate the fulfillment of such prophecy that he would rise again, that they might steal his body.
Right.
But they were in such a confused state. They were hiding out. They were scared. They were waiting. They didn't know what. They didn't know what they were waiting for. When we find ourselves tossed about in the mismatched expectations of our lives, and there's the letdown, and it's tied to people. A lot of times it's tied to people. We're so relational. So there's an absence of some sort. There's a loneliness. There's an isolation when our expectations aren't met. There's absence and there's disappointment. That is everything that not only the disciples were experiencing on Saturday, but I think that's life for a lot of us at various seasons where we feel isolated, we feel a longing for presence, and we feel disappointed. And they had no choice. The disciples had no choice but to sit in that and to experience it. I mean, the mortal reality of this life is a life of waiting. Not to get too macabre here, but
we all have a deadline.
We all have a deadline. I mean, Psalm 139 talks about that, that our days are numbered in the Lord's book. What do we do in the meantime?
Yeah.
And Saturday it holds us firmly when we lean into Saturday, that we can find meaning and purpose in the midst of uncertainty and disappointment and let down expectations, because we will always have one thing that will never be taken away from us, and that is the promises of God. Sometimes that's all we have. And I think God teaches us on Saturday, and that's enough, because we serve a God who always fulfills his promises. So to me, that is hope, and not a fingers crossed, I hope, and not in a hope of wishful thinking, but in that confidence of faith, knowing that God's promises will never let us down, no matter what we're sitting in.
I've been speaking with Pastor Jeff McCullough. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections here today. I hope you'll join us on Palm Sunday, April 13th at the Marriott Center on the Brigham Young University campus for Journey to Easter, which is a concert featuring the Luke's Choral Society, Orchestra, and friends, as well as pastoral and academic reflections on Holy Week and Easter. Pastor Jeff will be there.
I will.
Sharing about Holy Saturday. And we hope you learn about each of the days of Holy Week throughout the Christian world in our Journey to Easter series on the In Good Faith podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and we'd love you to know that In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. Pastor Jeff, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.